this kinds of interpretation and narratives that you're born into is what does this mean in two levels of analysis? First, it means that your actions are interlinked with other people's actions. What does this look like? It means that whatever actions that you do, it has harms and benefits that will also and stab someone in the gut. It means that person will have to suffer some forms of harms from my own conduct, right? We think that in our world, we want people to think about what we can do. We want people to think about what's the reciprocal benefit that you can get and what's the benefit that you can get, right? We think that when you actually give some form of happiness, when you to also be on the receiving end one day, right? Because this is the kind of unit that we want to propose. But on second level of analysis, we think that this communitarian values is most often than not, will most likely be are those who are most beneficial, who benefit the most from this kind of values, right? We think that if you are not at least privileged in forms of monetarily, you are also more privileged in terms of education. We think that when you are able to contribute to education, we think that what this proposes is that you force people to think what you can do as a duty for these people. We also think that it makes people as a society more humane. It makes you internalize and think what makes you human, right? We think that in our world, society doesn't just consist as one person, right? In order for them to survive. We think that when you give this kind of benefits, only then will you be able to understand, right? Yeah. It can be as simple as you just you as a child giving some money to another poor kid to buy some food for lunch, right? We think this is what's important. We just think this is why this is good, right? But sometimes it can also be harmful, right? First of all, we think when a child, we think that we can see to the fact that individualism is not bad entirely, but we also think that when a child is taught about individualism since such a prime age, since a green age, grow and become selfish all the time, right? Sure, we can see to the fact that some adults can rationalize their choices, right? But we don't necessarily think children are able to do so. But when you are taught as this value is okay since you are such a green age, now we think that in the end of the day, they won't be able to rationalize the communitarian value, right? Yeah. We think that when this happens, it means that your interests can clash with rights and interests of other groups of people. What does this look like? We think it looks like you being a white privileged man not wanting to give up anything else just because another person is black, because you don't see the most vulnerable in the society. We think that now it's problematic because the issue of clashing of rights, you don't really want to have any empathy, which I will later explain, right? Before that, yes.
Why is it in the interest of a minority parent to tell their child to give back to society when society takes so much away from them? Why shouldn't they just fight for themselves?
Okay. To others. You need to understand that you are now at this position, I am now debating in front of you because my ancestors decided they want to live and they want to give up certain kind of rights and they want to fight against a certain fight and sacrifice their benefits in order for their children. Benefit of what your ancestors did. This is why we think it's important, right? But before that, third argumentation. Why do we think as a parent we would want to do this, right? We think in the current status quo, the world teaches everyone, each individual, that every man is for himself, every country is for his country. You are taught to be more individualistic. You are taught to be more. First, we think it closes the bridge of understanding. And secondly, we also think it breeds a less empathetical society. Why is it so harmful? Because we think this prevents any actions to be taken upon any injustice that you see. What does this look like? We think what does this look like? We think countries won't want to. We also think this looks like adults who don't really feel the need to donate to centers because they don't see any benefit that accruing from them, right? But all in all, we think that all over the world, children grow into activists. We see tell you that why you are deriving happiness, you are able to derive happiness from the kind of contributions that you make to others because you consist of a communitarian unit.
Yeah. Thank you, Prime Minister, for the speech. Can we now invite the leader of the opposition? Yeah.
Before I start off, first of all, let me clarify that this is an active debate, and therefore I will clarify what is to ensure that their child is the happiest in the long run and does not face any harm, or if he or she does face harm, the harm is at its minimal level. So, what exactly is the problem with a communitarian society? What the society presumes and perceives as what happiness should be, and not what they individually feel and grow to develop as what happiness should be. But before I move on to my arguments, let me begin with the government said that communitarianism benefits the society more than being individualistic in terms of happiness. And here I will tell you why they are wrong. It is important to note that not all you grow up in a conservative society and a conservative family, and you therefore grow up to be conservative. But then this means that you would be anti-LGBT and cause harm to the LGBT society as well. So this shows us there is also a form of happiness that cannot be derived. It can cause harms as well when you grow up in a society that is different from what you believe in. So secondly, because we come from a lot of different walks in life and we come from different areas of the community, this puts a lot of burden on a
So I think in this debate, we should not rely more on about what Bunny talked about, like politicians, I think world. I think it's more about the timeline or the time setting for a child to grow up and whether or not a child can achieve the most amount of happiness during that time of being individualistic or being maybe communitarianism on God's side. Actually find a sense of belonging. Second, is individualism selfish and whether or not communitarianism harms them more? And lastly, I'll tell you who actually achieves the most amount of happiness. Firstly, in terms of different narratives, I think I agree with working government in saying that when a child grows up, there are different forms of narratives that this child grows up in. It might be being conservative. Yeah. So here's the problem. As a child, it's extremely hard for you to conceptualize so many forms of conflicting ideals that might not necessarily be what you want. So that means the responsibility of a child or a child to be enabled to do all these forms of things is extremely difficult for them. So a child is more likely to feel a lot of internal party won't necessarily be happy. If I go pro-life, enjoy my majority conservative society, the rest of the world might not necessarily be happy. So the happiness in your world is more quantifiable than anything. Take a seat. You talk about change, and you say that maybe one day we can or change your village that's very conservative. But how do you actually change the world? If the community or if the majority in that sense don't think that you being very liberal would help them or make them happy, then you won't necessarily find a sense of belonging. The problem is that you make. So if you're talking about changing world and going against those ideals, those contributions don't make sense to the majority, and you can't necessarily derive happiness in terms of finding a place to belong in. Take a seat. Second question: is individualism selfish? We don't think individualism. I'm not going to deny that. But the thing is, individualism does not necessarily mean only helping yourself or being selfish. If I conceptualize that my happiness on my own can be defined by the peace around the world, then I would strive to do that. I personally believe that the peace around the world is my individual form of happiness. Take a seat. But I believe that communitarianism is more selfish in government's world. I'll give you 4 reasons why communitarianism is more selfish in their world. 1, communitarianism is more for your communitarian good. It can also continuously upscale. People, like I agree with opening government, might be slightly greedy, might be slightly selfish. That means they will always demand more. They always want more. Because people don't believe that your contribution might necessarily be enough. Take a seat. The comparative is, you're need enough happiness to be in. So your world will keep upscaling that harm or upscaling that factor, and people will keep needing to achieve the happiness because that your contribution isn't enough for the community. Take a seat. And that's harmful for the child also, because active debate. Second, the problem with this is that sometimes when I help a person, you help actually feels that amount of happiness. Because as a child, I'm more likely to think whether or not I did too much, whether or not I did too little, and I'll keep conflicting upon myself whether or not I'll get that happiness. So the comparative is that the conclusion or the real actualization of that happiness actually feels that amount of happiness. Bunny talk about that, like the 2 ringgit change, let's say you have in your pocket, giving that poor, the lunch money example that Bunny talked about, but giving that poor boy. So the problem is, if you give that 2 ringgit to the poor boy, you're not giving me enough, do you think I do not have enough money, take a seat, or that 2 ringgit, but that 2 ringgit, let's say you give that 2 ringgit to the person, and the person might think that, what's your 2 ringgit for? It can only buy me teh ice, it won't do me much good. So the thing, what I'm trying to say here, because you don't actually know whether that person feels happy or not. Therefore, like your constitution and your forefathers might think that writing a constitution might be great for America, but newsflash, the constitution is also very racist and harm a lot. Therefore I can achieve the most amount of happiness. I think the derivation of happiness is much more limited on the side of poorer individuals if they cannot contribute as much as the privileged people. If I am poor and I believe that individually giving 5 ringgit is enough of a contribution,
we can always find out who needs more or who needs less. Given that, assuming it's true that people have conflicting ideas in society, one of them is likely to gravitate towards you anyway. Why can't you contribute to that cause?
Yeah, no, I don't know why you can find out whether or not the person knows or don't necessarily know. I think that is very hard to determine whether the person actually feels happy or not. The fourth and last reason here, the few reasons why poorer individuals don't necessarily feel happy, it's not because of their uncomfortable environment, it's not because of maybe they're eating working at the bare minimum and having a bare minimum wage. It's because society throws them, or the alternative of how society determines happiness is very consumerist and on a very large maybe with your family. These are things that aren't necessarily the communal cause or isn't as big as they can achieve it. So the comparative here is you might help a lot of minorities, and you might help you might help more minorities, but that is harder to achieve. You have to latch on to the ultimate goal of the world that's very hard for a poor person to achieve. So here's the final thing I will talk about. In conclusion, the comparative is that on government's world, your happiness is more compromised than anything. Seek the world and help the world, but you can drink coffee every day and eat at a nice restaurant and you yourself feel happy. The full actualization of happiness is not attainable on side of government.
Saying that's the leader of the opposition. Now to open the case for the closing of this debate, can we have the member of the government?
Unfortunately for the opening half of this debate, this motion is not about minority individuals. Like, to be quite honest, there are conservative communities that will be empowered on the proposition, and there will be some liberal communities that are in opposition when they suggest you get individual happiness from giving to charity. That's not your side, that is our side. That's when individualism collapses and you don't have a debate if it literally is the same principle as what communitarianism is. In order for there to be some debate in this house, there needs to be a distinction. What is that distinction? In your world, by being communitarian. It's not about a delayed version of happiness, because if there's delay in our world, there's delay in your world as well, because finding happiness for yourself, can be opening opposition, is actually quite hard to do. So what is the closing government going to do in this debate? We're going to do three things. First, I'm going to talk about the pursuit of happiness, deciding what makes you happy and achieving that version of happiness. Second, and third, I'm going to talk about this parent for work. I think actually kids are an investment, and in a world in which you teach them to be communitarian, we say parents are on the receiving end of this. Before that, just two things to opening opposition. First, they say, look, you are going to be burdened. Your communities are going to make it very hard for you to opt into, you need to donate huge amounts, and therefore you quantify your happiness. Look, like, I think the first thing I'll suggest is to pray on church. Like, if you're part of a community that's based on culture, they make it accessible because they benefit from you being part of the community. So I don't think it's true that everyone has to donate huge amounts of money to fit the communal support that you say is necessary. But a second, individual happiness is inaccessible because you know why? It's in conflict with every other person's individual happiness. Nature of happiness, I would suggest that you put yourself down more than other people put yourself down in this context. But a second, they suggest, look, some communities are toxic. Yeah, I don't think this is actually a debate in this house, because there are some individuals who are toxic. In your world, you empower homophobic individuals, you empower homophobic communities. It's a wash. I don't know how you plan on winning that. Right, extension material, everything else we integrate. And second, trying to reach that version of happiness that you decided makes you happy. In the decision process, we say teaching children to find happiness from a community is actually a far easier thing to do. The reason for this is very simple. We are going to concede it's probably brainwashing, it's probably setting up what your life is going to be. But that life that we've taught you to find happiness from is the easiest one to access and that easy guidelines to be. So if you come from a community that is very happiness, you've been brought up to learn that this is the ultimate goal, and that when you've manufactured this happiness, it is as real as it gets, but it's been set for you from young. What's the comparative on the opposition? They will say, we have autonomy and freedom, we will just let individuals roam free. In this roaming free in this world, people get sad, they get lost, because people don't know what makes them happy. There's this consumerist lifestyle decisions, they regret every step of the way. There is self-doubt. If we have less autonomy in exchange for more happiness, we say that is a comparative that is better. So we think first, deciding what makes you happy is easier when it's communitarian. Second, achieving that happiness, because the second part is getting there faster. In a world in which it's individualistic, people have conflicting someone countdown. So even if you are happy pursuing what you think is important, someone else is on the receiving end of that version of happiness. But second, people are always trying to beat you, because in order for my version of happiness to exist, it has to take away from someone else's, because it's me or someone else. But the comparative is a community. A community literally benefits from mollycoddling you into their version, because it's not consistently in conflict with other people. Therefore, we think in pursuing happiness and maintaining it, we are better off in closing government. But the last thing I'll suggest is you have better access to versions of happiness in the closing government. Because in a world in which you don't have to decide everything for yourself, and sometimes people are around to decide things for you, you have versions of happiness you probably important. That world is a world in which you are controlled by your crippling depression, your anxiety, and your issues alone forever. Second, conflict resolution. There are two parts to conflict resolution. First, engaging with that conflict, and second, fixing the conflict. A lot of people go through shit, like you don't know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, it might not even be your fault. In a world in which it is individualistic, you couldn't do it because of your individual self. But after this, in a world in which it's a community, conflict resolution is easier because you share the burden. You wouldn't feel as if you were the reason for this conflict. In fact, most of the time you're more likely to talk to your parents because you feel like you owe part of your happiness to resolve conflicts together. This means you are more likely to engage with problems yourself. Before I go to the last part, yes.
More often, individual happiness has a greater ability to decide when to stop, compared to the community where it's larger in number, where your consumerism is more prevalent. Don't you think the derivation of happiness is harder when you have to please a lot of people?
You don't understand, man. Consumerism preys on the fact that you must beat everyone else. It preys on the fact that I must be supreme over other individuals, that I must be losing sometimes, winning sometimes. If you wouldn't be so influenced by the fact that there is this ultimate version of happiness. The last part of my extension, parents. Look, I think this has been like a little bit under discussed in this debate. We think kids are investment. Like as much as your parents love you, they also want things back from you. Whether it's emotional support, a financial security in the future, or this return in investment. In a world which is individualistic, kids don't feel like they need to come back to their parents. Parents are left in their 50s and 40s thinking what they did wrong, thinking what was this child that I brought up to care for my community, give my love, my life to, and this child doesn't come back giving back to them the same emotion. It wasn't their fault. They were brought up to be individuals. Not only that, kids who are individualistic, once their parents are gone, once parents no longer like are part of their lives, it might be happiness for them individually, but you harm the parents who created you and the people who decided to give up part of their life to make you a better person. And we say this is incredibly unjustified for these parents who spend huge amounts of money on communitarianism as a concept for individual pursuits. But not only that, we think it's part and parcel of life. If we can't guarantee you choice, the least we can guarantee you is happiness.
Thank you, member of the government, for the speech. We now have the member of the opposition.
I opt out of consent.
Give me a minute.
please not to round up the entire government bench. Can we have the government review?
Individualistic society, the parents are also going to be individualistic. We think that essentially, if they care so much about how that child is going to be happy, how that child is not going to be pressured, that parent wouldn't be able to support that child either because they're equally individualistic, and that child will constantly be wanting on each other. That's the principle of individualism that they must defend. I will first look at Amrit's extension that was largely unresponded to before moving on to the extension that came from Dave and then taking out opening opposition. But let's look at the list of things that Amrit explained to us that went unresponded. To a parent, that as you put and make choices for your child, like essentially you are investing in them, you're putting in emotional investment, you're putting in like money, all these things need to come back towards you if it's an after. Because you are their community. They are more likely to give to you and enjoy the process of giving to you if you are part of their community. In their world, the want and desire to go out into the world and only help yourself would always trump the relationship with your parents. No response to this. But we also say that essentially conflict resolution, this is where they kind of like misrepresented this argument. We say that essentially when it's an individual pursuit, it means that your choices, exactly what the extension came from Dave, your choices were your own. Seek for that support because you feel that you are constantly in your own pursuit to actually fix your own problems. That's the individualism that exists within their world. In our world, you would have communities to talk to. You're more likely to engage with your parents. You're more likely to share the burdens. These are things that Amrit explained that wasn't engaged upon by the opposition side. But here are some things that they did. Like in our world, you can't opt in to those choices. But this assumes, first of all, that choices necessarily equate to happiness. But we don't think that's true. We think that the access and the means to which you gain the happiness is what's more important. This means that in our world, that even if you have less choices, you like acceptances that you know that you can do. In their world, there's a constant pursuit to actually find out what you are happy with. But as you pursue and with that autonomy that Dave says is so important, you also fall prey to all the manipulation that exists in an equally individualistic society. We have corporations that are individualistic and don't care whether or not you spend money on they're constantly upscaling. Shared communal interest, it means that there's a more homogeneous kinds of happiness that is supplied to you, and you can equally access that. Like don't privilege one over another, right? It doesn't deal. Other person that's probably more privileged than you, because the likelihood of you being privileged is very low, also conflicts upon yours. If you are a parent, you're going to make sure that your odds are like as fair as possible, and you ensure that the choices of your child aren't going to be encroached upon by someone else's choices. This means that their choices
based on communitarian standards, the poorest of people will always strive to achieve the standards that the rich have set. That means opting out is harder. Why is that? Locking into such limiting cultural norms, it could be clear.
Okay, let's look at your standards. Okay, it's really funny. So the first one in the communitarianism, your standards is you give to the poor. So the richest person to the other poor people will be the least successful. But the money goes to the poor anyway, so like that's a little bit better than in your world where the standard is fulfilling yourself, where you constantly need to buy more things to please yourself. It's essentially a rat race to pleasure yourself. that in your world is a lot more American, and our world is a lot more equal. But here's where I deal with this idea about parents feeling pressure, and this also deals with the POI a little bit more. So like essentially, even if those standards are high, you have more community support in our world, because even if everyone needs to be a doctor, you have more ability. Praises you for being a doctor. This means that your ability to find acceptance and find happiness is a lot easier and a lot more accessible in our world. But the last thing I would say about this is that, like, your kids' pursuits, because they're so individualistic, become more demanding towards you as a parent. This means that when your child makes a choice, they are not that child, don't harm someone else. They're like, but who cares? I don't care about the other person, I care about myself. This means that it's more harmful to you and more demanding to you as a parent because the child never compromises. Then, like, this whole emptiness syndrome thing is not because they're empty, but in our world, that child not only doesn't leave, but they enjoy being with their parents and they enjoy being in that community. That prayer circles are actually something that actually give benefit towards them. So it kind of like mixes with the bunch, right? Essentially, individualism also upscales, and communitarianism also upscales. But it's about the but as a parent, you want to consider the likelihood of you being privileged versus you being not privileged, right? It's quite likely that most people are not going to be privileged. Yet in individualism, you know for no one's going to help you because you have no community. In our world, if you are privileged, then good for you, you can help other people. But if you're not privileged, you're more likely to be able to gain support by the community because there are literally more structures that encourage this kind of happiness. And the process in and of itself, even if you don't attain success, a product-oriented society, that when you attain that happiness, that product that makes you happy, then only you are happy. But in and of itself, even if you don't manage to help that person, the act was something that created happiness within you.
Yeah.